The first topic I had for us this morning deals with the country of Georgia. I know it's kind of confusing because there's a state in our nation called Georgia as well, but there's a country called Georgia. Here's where it is, and it's okay if you don't. It's by Azerbaijan and Armenia. You got Russia close. As I zoom them out, you see Ukraine up there. That's Russia. So Georgia is a tiny little state. They hate Russia, although culturally a lot of overlap. Obviously, they're right there, and you'll see little lines, dotted lines. These are places where Georgia has actually invaded and taken land, and we don't talk about that nearly as much as Ukraine. I'm not really quite sure. Well, because there's not fighting going on, probably. But Georgia has recently signed a bill just called anti-LGBTQ. So if you look in your show notes, you can pull this article up for yourself. I was sent this by Richard. Thanks to Richard for tipping me off to it. And the reason I'm talking about it today, it's not uniquely related to Methodism or Christianity. I think it's important for Westerners, and most of my audience is Western, to understand what's going on geopolitically globally. You know, right here in America, we're swimming in the thick of this cultural revolution that's been going on really since the 1960s with Kinsey and money, really trying to revise how the public understands itself sexually. Sexual identitarian politics has been used to create a wedge in our society between the old and the new, the eternal and the artificial. And so it continues to be used in trans developments, LGBTQ stuff, and we here in the thick of it can't necessarily step outside of it and see it for what it is. So it's helpful to look at how different parts of the world are responding to America exporting its theories about human sexuality and identity. So that's what's going on here in Georgia, which has, it's its own state dealing with Russia, its own cultural preservation issues. If you haven't, Johnny Harris is a YouTuber. He does really pretty good work. I think he leans farther left than I do. I don't think he's even a believer, but he does really good segments on different stuff around the world. He makes beautiful maps. But he did one on Georgia that I found really helpful. Interviewed a lot of local Georgians talking about how they perceive their country. It's a beautiful country. I would love to go someday. Anyway, let's look at this article and try and figure out a little bit what's going on. The Speaker of Georgia's parliament on Thursday signed into law a bill similar to Russian legislation that curbs the rights of LGBTQ people despite warnings from the European Union. The move came a day after Georgia's pro-Western president, Salome, I'm not going to say that last name, at loggerheads with the ruling Georgia Dream Party, refused to sign the bill. The bill is similar to Moscow's gay propaganda law, which also bans gender reassignment and nullifies same-sex marriages performed abroad or on Georgian territory. Quote, in conformity with the Constitution, I signed today the law on family values and the protection of minors, which Salome didn't sign, Speaker Shalva, crazy last name, said on Facebook. I know it's not crazy, it's just I'm not part of that culture. The ruling Georgian Dream pushed the bill through Parliament last month, a vote boycotted by the opposition, and which has fueled tensions ahead of a crucial October 26 parliamentary election. Papaushvili said the measure, quote, is based on common sense, historical experience, and centuries-old Christian, Georgian, and European values, rather than on changeable ideas and ideologies. So that's a good quote right there. That helps you kind of understand how it is that many people around the world are responding to America. He claimed that, quote, the law protects the rights of all citizens, end quote. However, rights groups and Western countries have said that it is discriminatory and creates a dangerous environment for LGBTQ people. Last month, the well-known Georgian transgender woman was stabbed to death, an attack that came during the push for the law. The bill also comes after Tbili's recent adoption of an anti-NGO foreign influence law, which triggered weeks of mass anti-government protests and Western condemnation. Critics accuse the ruling Georgian Dream Party of moving closer to the Kremlin's orbit, Kremlin is the leading body in Russia, and jeopardizing Georgia's bid for EU membership. So this is kind of complicated because Russia is overtly trying to influence the politics of all the countries around it, as seen most profoundly in the Ukraine. And there's a legal measure. Johnny Harris talks about this in his report of they've adopted legislation saying that foreign money cannot come in to influence their politics. The accusation being that America and the EU have been pumping money into Georgia to create anti-Russian sentiment. Excuse me. Still getting over this cough from my sinus infection. So there are a lot of people alleging in this article, especially, that this legal measure, is an extension not of really what Georgians want, but of a Russian agenda to expand their culture to surrounding areas. So one way of seeing this would be that people of the world generally are indifferent to sexual freedom and don't really care about America advancing the LGBTQ cause. If you don't know it, we've been trying to coercively export our sexual norms for some time, including under the Trump administration. Ambassadors were sent out across the world to make trade deals contingent upon countries passing laws that we like around gay stuff, or abolishing laws that we didn't like around gay stuff. So this has been something that we've been trying to strong-arm countries into being much more accepting of homosexual or transsexual or demisexual, whatever practices around the world. And some places have happily accepted it along with the money that flows afterwards. There are a lot of places that have rejected it. In Africa and East Asia, I've just said, you know what, if the cost of doing business with you is that we have to undo our moral fabric, we're not willing to do it. So you'll notice a lot of language like that in these quotes is, we want to protect our families, we want to protect our culture, our religion, and changing these sexual norms has implications in all of these ways. So in the hyper-individualist West, we often hear things like, if you don't like gay marriage, don't get gay married. You know, if you don't like abortion, don't have one. It's this understanding that we don't share in a social fabric, that what another person does not impact you. But people in other countries can't help but notice that in America, we have a hard time staying unaffected by one another, that there does seem to be something called a social fabric, or you can call it something else, but where we are all impacted by one another, and that whenever we are indifferent to the sexual behaviors of others, or monetary behaviors of others, or family behavior of others, that has a way of impacting us, our children, our families. And so there is a reason to try and make sure that a country's laws do conform to the social fabric so that you protect your culture and fabric. So you'll notice a lot of the politics in America very much has to do with this notion of a social fabric, protecting a shared monoculture that we all share in, even if we have differences in ethnicity. So this is how it's all connected. In Georgia and around the world, people are trying to protect local cultures and values while being also part of a global society, and different places are doing it differently, and Western media is going to treat it differently based on if they toe the line and what the audience is. So as I look at Georgia, I think they're in a tough spot politically for several reasons, and it's hard to say how much of this is rooted in actual sentiment of Georgians and how much of it is part of this kind of satellite cultural warfare between Russia and America. I really don't know. What I do know is that this sexual revolution that's been taking place since the 1960s does have huge implications for not just our social fabric, but also our religious life, because what we do in the bed very much matters in our religious life. And anyone who tells you otherwise is lying to you, and that's going to cost you if you believe them. So keep watching Georgia. Keep watching around the world, actually. I think, yes, in America, we're the trendsetters, but we are not the only ones that matter. So keep that in mind.